Chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, honorable members of the House of Representatives present, particularly the Chairman and Deputy Chairman of the House Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19, honorable ministers, members of the Presidential Task Force, Nigerians watching us from home and their offices, gentlemen of the press, a very good afternoon to you. I welcome you to the national briefing for Thursday, 21st May 2020. Today we are privileged to have with us the members of the legislative arm of government, and we welcome you warmly. This afternoon we'll be taking the remarks, as usual, from the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, as well as the technical updates from the Honorable Minister of Health, the DG NCDC, and the National Coordinator. If we have updates from any of the ministers, any of the sectors covered by the ministers, we shall bring them to the podium to give you the updates before we take your questions. We now begin with the remarks by the Chairman of the Presidential Task Force, the Secretary to Government of the Federation. Chairman, sir.
The Chairman, House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19, Honorable Dr. Haruna Michelia, the Deputy Chairman, Right Honorable Sam Onyegbo, members of the Presidential Task Force, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen of the press. I welcome you to the national briefing by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 for Thursday, 21st of May, 2020. As we progress in the first week of the extension of phase 1 of the eased lockdown measures as directed by Mr. President, it is necessary to remind Nigerians of the objectives of this course of action, which is primarily to save lives. It is also of utmost importance to remind our subnational entities on the need to diligently implement the guidelines and to exercise caution in relaxing restrictions in a manner that is capable of setting back the gains already made. Above all, it is imperative for each of us to take personal and collective responsibility. The foregoing admonition becomes critical as we prepare for celebrations at the end of the holy month of Ramadan. It is the prayer of the Presidential Task Force that we shall all celebrate this Salah and many more in good health, and beseech the Almighty to accept our supplication and look upon our nation and the world with mercy. I therefore use this opportunity to wish all our Muslim brothers and sisters a very happy and safe Eid celebrations. But as we celebrate, we want to once again caution on the need to wear a mask, keep physical distancing, avoid large congregations, avoid unnecessary interstate travels, and observe personal hygiene, amongst other suggested safety measures. The Presidential Task Force is pleased to inform you that in order to underscore the seriousness attached to this COVID-19 pandemic, the House of Representatives has set up an ad hoc committee on COVID-19 in deepening the existing collaborative spirit. We shall work together with the legislature to be more productive and add value to the overall delivery of services to Nigerians on behalf of whom we hold our responsibility in trust. I welcome you, sirs, for joining us in spite of your very tight schedules. These are very difficult and odd times, and we need your legislative support and cooperation even in the execution of our mandate. In the same spirit of collaboration and coordination, I wish to inform you that I participated in the virtual meeting of the National Economic Council with the Vice President and all the state governors today. This is coming on the heels of an earlier virtual meeting between the President and the governors in a space of 1 week. During the meeting, the issue of alignment of the state-level actions with the guidelines issued was emphasized. Similarly, emphasized is the need for the states to diligently implement and enforce compliance. Particularly, I underscored the need for governors to provide personal and strong leadership at this time, carry the policy of community ownership to the grassroots, and create deeper awareness. The governors were also advised on the decision taken by some of their colleagues to permit large gatherings as such decisions could inadvertently endanger the elderly, the sick, and those with underlying factors during such gatherings. The strong advisory from the PTF is that large gatherings beyond 20 persons remains restricted and should be adhered to. On Monday, 18th May 2020, when we briefed the nation on the next steps of our national response as approved by Mr. President, that the guidelines for this phase would be explained in details and published. I'm pleased to inform you that the document is now ready, and the national coordinator will present the document and subsequently upload it on the different platforms. This would further clarify any ambiguity hitherto perceived, and no doubt clearly let us know where each and every one of us stands in playing our roles to make the guidelines work. For some time now, the Presidential Task Force has consistently answered questions and provided explanations on the category of persons and services exempted from some aspects of these guidelines, particularly as it relates to restrictions on interstate movement and curfew. For the avoidance of doubt, essential workers include our indefatigable medical personnel, diligent journalists, courageous fire services personnel, and telecommunication workers are all exempted. The Inspector General of Police has further clarified the categories of essential workers in alignment with the guidelines and has issued instructions to security agents to work on the approved exemptions. With this clarification, we sincerely hope that the persistent complaints of harassment by these categories of essential workers, especially medical personnel and journalists, will be put to rest so that we can continuously work in battling this pandemic. And I would be upfront to offer apologies to all of you that have suffered some form of treatments that are not expected to have been meted out to you in the course of the execution of your several duties across the nation. The Presidential Task Force urges all essential workers to go about their legitimate businesses, carrying with them valid means of identification, and to exercise courtesy in approaching security personnel. Through the surveillance system set up by the Presidential Task Force, we have received reports that Nigerians have been purchasing the hydroxychloroquine in large quantities. We wish to reiterate that this drug has not been certified for use in treating COVID-19 in Nigeria by the relevant health and pharmaceutical authorities. And that underscores the reason why initially we were very cautious of identifying any form of medication, because we know that the issue of abuse in terms of self-medication will become quite rampant. We therefore strongly warn against self-medication. If you are sick, please seek medical advice, and if you are confirmed positive, kindly self-isolate in an approved facility. The COVID-19 is highly infectious and dangerous, so don't attempt by any stretch of imagination to think that you can prepare yourself for management and also treat yourself. The Presidential Task Force continues to receive reports and support, donation of equipment, and solidarity messages from professional organizations. In this regard, we want to acknowledge the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, Chemical Society of Nigeria, the NNPC and its partners, Mrs. Osia SA, through its Nigerian representative, Maestro Defense Systems Limited, for their generosity and offer of services pro bono. Yesterday, Wednesday, May 20, 2020, served as a stark reminder to the entire world about the severity of the COVID-19, when the World Health Organization reminded the world that we are still far away in the fight against this pandemic. According to Dr. Tedros, the WHO Director General, 106,000 cases were recorded globally in 24 hours, representing the highest single-day number since the outbreak of the pandemic. This is significant because it brings to realization the relentless assault of the virus on humanity. If after the several months of expenditure by the countries all over the world that would have run into trillions of dollars, we recorded the highest ever since the declaration of the pandemic in terms of number, 106,000 globally yesterday. With the efforts that have been put in place, with the containment, with the testing, with the expenditure, we still recorded that number. That is truly an evidence of the fact that COVID-19 has come to ravage our wealth and our health, and it is going to disrupt the way and pattern of life. I don't know for how long, but I can assure you that our ways of life will remain disrupted for a very, very long time. For us in Nigeria, the importance of this message is very clear. We need to eschew skepticism about the existence of this virus and its potency, change our behavior, and commit to joining hands in tackling this pandemic. Yesterday we recorded, as per fatalities, 202 losses of life across our nation. To a lot of people, that is just statistics. But for some of us that are sitting across here, it's not statistics. We can place some faces, and those of you that are sitting on the other side, you can place some faces on these numbers. And that drives home. That drives home the fact that we are in very difficult times. We are being confronted with an enemy that is unseen. We are being confronted with something that is overwhelmed the entire world, and we cannot but do everything to reduce its impact, slow down its ravaging force, and make sure that we flatten the curve and do everything possible to stop the transmission in our communities and exposing those vulnerable that can fall extremely sick and in the process lose their lives. I will make it a little bit personal for me. I've lost a colleague in this process. Of the 5 working days, the week preceding Mala Abba became positive, the late chief of staff to the president. Of the 5 working days, we sat beside each other in 4 of those days, with the exception of the Tuesday that he went to Kogi for condolence over the loss of the mother of the governor. I shared official functions with him. We sat beside each other for the 4 of the 5 working days. Some of my colleagues had meetings with him on Saturday and Sunday within the same week. But unfortunately, he lost the battle against COVID-19. I can see the face of a chief judge of a state who was my classmate in ABU when we went as young lads to study law in 1976. That's almost 40-something years ago. I can see those faces. I can see the ravage that has come upon our land. And I know you can identify with a lot of people out there. So my message to you today is that we have a collective responsibility to work together in earnest, realizing that each and every one of us has a part to play in this enterprise so that we can force this virus and limit its spread. I am particular about congregational gatherings. Large gatherings would expose even the 20% that we've been trying to protect. So I would urge our subnationals to really reconsider their decisions in allowing for large gatherings to take place until when we have been fully prepared and we can adjudge that the moment has come for that to be allowed. I now call on the Honorable Minister of Health and the DG, Nigerian Center for Disease Control, to update you on the current situation, while the National Coordinator will intimate you with the critical elements of the guidelines. I thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, everybody. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, other ministers, permanent secretaries, directors, visiting member of the National Assembly. I greet you all, and as we mark these holidays coming and prepare for a holiday, we must not forget that we are in the middle of a massive global pandemic which has taken many lives and where the virus will not be taking a holiday. We must therefore not let down our guard, must continue to be as vigilant as possible. Look at the figures of other countries, we shudder and shake. We have been lucky to have been spared such bad figures so far, but must not take anything for granted. As far as our country is concerned, our surveillance and contact tracing and testing capacity is increasing gradually in all states as more laboratories come aboard. I would like to use the opportunity here to call on all our state governors and leaders and FCT to increase the number of surveillance teams and isolation and treatment capacity to keep pace. I was also a member of the, to able to take part today at the National Economic Council and have an interaction with their excellencies, in which I had the opportunity to speak also on the COVID-19 pandemic. We have developed more key performance indicators to track surveillance and strategic directions and programs. As of this morning, we have recorded 6,677 confirmed cases in 34 states and the Federal Capital Territory, out of which 1,840 have been successfully treated and discharged. Sadly, we have recorded about 200 deaths in 25 states and the Federal Capital Territory. A finding from the analysis of the death patterns shows 70% to 30% for male and female, around that ratio. And about 70% of fatalities were persons over 60 years old, while majority of positives were between the ages of 29 and 49. Those are the most active ages in life. I also advise those who are taking the test and are waiting result to heed the advisory to self-isolate yourselves in your homes until you get your result, and in order to be able to save your friends and your family, wear masks and observe hand and respiratory hygiene until your result is out, so that your community and those around you will not necessarily be exposed. We are scaling up training of health workers on infection prevention and control, and so infection among healthcare workers is gradually reducing. In Kano, the training has been scaled even to patent and proprietary medicine vendors, and retraining is now a continuous process to be sustained, so that nobody will forget the protocols for this very highly infectious disease. State-level infection prevention and control measures and training are being carried out working with partners, and has also been standardized to be stepped down to community level. The fact-finding team of the Ministry of Health that went to Calabar has returned successfully with the report, and we have been able to identify areas of strength and areas that are in need of upgrade, including laboratory infrastructure. The state of readiness of the state against COVID-19 is reasonable and includes setting up of COVID-19 task force, production of PPEs, face masks, of which samples were presented to our team and will be forwarded to NAFDAC for validation. The areas of strength and weaknesses, as said, are still being analyzed so as to improve federal cross-river state collaboration and support. The critical findings is that no case of COVID-19 has still been reported as at 20th May 2020 when the team returned to Abuja. 16 cases had been tested, of which all were negative, and 28 persons of interest had been followed up, of which none of them presented any symptoms after completion of their 14 days of self-quarantine. And The testing center, there are no other testing centers established in the state as yet. We are going to be working with the state to establish protocols and improve communication and reporting to our reporting centers here in Abuja. Our team in Kano has made a very successful trip now to Gombe on fact-finding mission. After the tour to Borno, the reports from these states are being awaited so that we can streamline the response and provide more targeted support. A new medical team has been assembled to take over the management of the This Day Dome Isolation Center, which was donated to the government by the private sector. And it is a very comprehensive treatment center for second, third, and even fourth level treatment. Has dialysis machines, ventilators, and facilities for waste disposal. Admissions will start at any time now. We have heard of the threatened industrial action in Lagos State among doctors. I spoke with the president of the Lagos chapter of the association yesterday evening to dissuade the doctors from the planned sit-at-home protest that they wanted to conduct. And I also listened to their complaints about harassment at security checkpoints. I communicated this to the Honorable Honorable Commissioner of Lagos State, Commissioner of Health, with the suggestion that he facilitates the issuing of special passes that identify health workers as such to ease their transit to and from work, and also to ease the screening for security officers at checkpoints to be able to identify who is who. It is my recommendation that the same passes be issued to health workers in all states and the Federal Capital Territory to forestall misidentification. I also had the honor of carrying out a similar intervention in respect of medical workers in Federal Capital Territory in the company of Federal Capital Territory Minister under the auspices of the Speaker of the House to reach an understanding over stabilizing the sources of payment of their salary. Our health workers are our foot soldiers, and we shall ensure that they're able to discharge their duties unhindered. In response to a question that was raised the other day about the morbidity pattern, I will say that the comorbidity of the persons, the fatalities we have had to COVID-19, 70% of them had hypertension or diabetes, and then the rest were kidney disease, HIV, cancer, tuberculosis, and others undetermined. I shall remind Nigerians again on the need to adhere to the advisories which I re-emphasize, that masks must be worn and washed daily, and washed, especially when you go out, you must wear your mask, and where possible you iron it, and that the mask should cover mouth and nose and should not be left under the chin while you are having a conversation, as you often see on television, particularly when you are having close quarter conversations. Tissues, as usual, must be used during coughing and sneezing and appropriately disposed of. All other measures that have been prescribed, like social distancing, abstaining from any kind of unnecessary travel, should be adhered to. Any kind of travel from one state to the other carries the risk of transporting a virus, the coronavirus, from a place of prevalence to a place where it was not present. We trust that the collaboration and cooperation of citizens is understood as an important and extremely important part of the success of whatever it is that we're all doing here. Thank you for your attention.
Chair of the Presidential Task Force, honorable ministers, our guests, honorable members of the House of Representatives, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Today I'd like to address an issue that has led to quite a bit of conversation and consternation in some places. Visuals of people in treatment centers in relative comfort, and the anxiety that has led to and discussions comparing those images to the images that we also see on TV of very severe cases in different parts of the world, and imagery we don't want to see in Nigeria. But if we have to, we will deal with it. But it's always important to remind people of the full spectrum of clinical presentation that we see with this new virus. We see a disease, a new disease, that in 80% of cases, people are mildly or completely asymptomatic, i.e. they don't have any symptoms at all. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any reason for these people to be in hospitals and to be isolated. The only reason we're isolating them is to prevent them from transmitting to others. Now, in many contexts in the world, when this outbreak first broke out in China, they carried out a very similar policy. They treated all the severe cases in hospitals and isolated every single person that was infected in isolation centers, the temporary isolation centers, some of which you saw being built in 10 days and 2 weeks. You remember those images on TV. In other countries in the world, and this is public knowledge, in Germany, in the West, in Western Europe, in the US, they've made a decision to treat all asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic people at home. That's a decision that they have made in that context. We have struggled with these decisions in Nigeria because we're struggling with the realities of where we live and the context that we live in. We want to prevent transmission. Therefore, we want to institutionalize the treatment of everyone. We have held back on advocating for home treatment and home isolation because we recognize that the circumstances in which many Nigerians live makes home isolation a very difficult and sometimes an impossible option for many people who live in very tight accommodation in family groups and communities. So there are no easy options. Every day we identify new patients. Yesterday we confirmed 199 newly infected people in Lagos State alone. It means that if we were to continue on our policy of institutional isolation and treatment for everyone, Lagos this morning has to find 199 new rooms to accommodate these newly diagnosed people. This is not possible in our reality. It is a simple fact. You can look at the numbers. As the numbers increase, we will struggle with this. So the Presidential Task Force and everyone involved in this response is having to think about alternatives. We're thinking about community management. We're thinking about home isolation. We haven't come out with any definite policy on this, but we are thinking about these things because we have to. It's not a choice. It's not an ideal scenario, but these are the realities of managing cases in our context, and we're looking at all the choices available to us, and we will have to make those decisions. We will make the best decisions available to us in the best interest of everyone, together with state governments, together with local governments, together with the private sector, to provide the best possible care for our people. Having said that, this is a new virus, and we're learning. Every day we're learning about transmissibility of the virus. Up till now, we have kept patients in care or advised that patients be kept in care until they turn out to be negative on the test that we're using, the PCR test. New evidence is emerging that even when the test is still positive, that in certain circumstances after that patient has been in care for a certain amount of time, it is possible and safe to discharge that patient to home isolation. So we're looking at the evidence, and we might change our guidelines over time. And I'm sharing this so that we start preparing ourselves for some changes in direction of how we are planning to go. But also to say that we are learning. There are no definites in this response. And the key thing is that we are ready to look at emerging science and change as we learn more about this new virus. We must never forget that we're in May. This is the month 5 since this new virus emerged. There's no other disease, as far as I remember, that we have learned so much so quickly as we have evolved our response. And with every new bit of knowledge we learn, we tweak the response a little bit in order to make it better. The biggest Achilles heel of this virus is that you can transmit it while you feel completely well. This is the biggest challenge we have, that you can transmit this virus while feeling completely well. And the people you transmit it to can be vulnerable. They can be those that will then get it and become extremely ill and sometimes pass away. So there's a responsibility that you have, not only to yourself, but to the most vulnerable in our society. And that is why it's so tricky to make these decisions, because you're not just deciding for yourself, do I isolate myself or not? This decision is important for you, but also your family and your loved ones. So as we go into this weekend, it's important that we think about these issues, and hopefully they will drive us into taking responsibility for those things that we can take responsibility for. I was happy yesterday to receive a new set of guidelines, draft guidelines, by the Public Transport Owners of Nigeria Association, PTONA. Those are people that manage the long-distance buses that travel across the country, what we call luxurious buses. They had drafted their own guidelines for reopening safely, and they sent it to us for review and to advise them on whether the measures that they are now recommending for how to manage their loading centers, their buses, their engagement with their customers at the point when we may allow them to reopen. And this is really what we've been advising every society, every organization, every community, be it faith-based, be it cultural-based, be it professionally based, to come up with guidelines for themselves. We're happy to advise, we're happy to engage, but this needs to be led and owned by the leaders of those organizations. We need every bit of society to take responsibility for that part where they own and manage. It's only by working through this that we'll be able to come out of this safely. But like the chair of the Presidential Task Force so eloquently said a few minutes ago, society will not be the same in the near future, and we have to really learn to adapt to it. And the earlier we do this, the better we can live safely into the future, at least for the short term. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Honorable visitors, Chair and Deputy Chair of the House Committee on COVID infection, the Chairman of the Presidential Task Force, members of the PTF, ladies and gentlemen of the press, good evening. I would like to start first of all by going through the key highlights of the implementation guidelines for the containment of COVID-19. Before I do that, I would like to emphasize that we have not changed a lot of things. What we had 2 weeks ago will continue. So effective from Monday, the 18th of May, the easing of the lockdown remains largely the same. and will be characterized by the following enforceable actions, which will include the mandatory use of non-medical face masks, the mandatory provision of hand-washing facilities and sanitizers in all public spaces, the restrictions in interstate travel and intrastate travel as well, based on certain conditions which I will outline in a few minutes, and the adaptation of offices and businesses to ensure physical distancing, including the use of floor markings, crowd control, and mass gathering reduction strategies. The mass gathering of more than 20 people outside of a workplace is still prohibited. We will ensure controlled access to markets and locations of economic activities. Mandatory temperature checks will continue in public spaces with physical distancing of 2 meters. All passenger flights will remain banned, and there will be mandatory supervised isolation of persons arriving from outside the country for at least 14 days. In terms of the regulation of these guidelines, we will continue to work with local authorities and encourage them to create mobile courts for immediate prosecution of offenders, particularly those who violate guidelines relating to face mask covering, relating to monitoring of temperature, or institutions that fail to comply with these protocols, as well as restrictions on interstate movement. In terms of the detail, just wanted to remind the general public that for Lagos, Ogun, and FCT, the curfews that have been imposed overnight, and including the nationwide application of this, will continue from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The lockdown in Kano has been extended, as we said at the beginning of the week, for another 2 weeks. In terms of general movement, people may go out to buy necessary foods and for exercise. Movement between local government areas is strongly discouraged unless for critical reasons such as healthcare and work. The public are advised to avoid unnecessary contact with people. Interstate travel is restricted except for essential travel, such as those involved with supply chain and services, such as goods, agricultural products with a limited capacity of accompanying personnel, petroleum products, relief items and supplies, construction supplies, and registered courier services. Within state borders, the restrictions relating to reduced occupancy for buses, taxis, and tricycles will be maintained. Travel should be between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. For buses and motor parks, the same opening hours apply between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. For agriculture, trucks bearing agricultural and animal products must be allowed easy passage, and companies involved in food processing can also continue with their operations. For construction sites, we are asking for state governments to please take up responsibility for the provision of waivers to allow the construction of critical roads to resume, but this should be limited to the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. For banks and other financial institutions as well as offices, now is the opportunity to start adjusting to the new life post-COVID as we lift restrictions over the next 2 weeks. We're therefore asking banks and offices to make allowance for physical distancing measures both inside and outside their premises, to ensure that staff working in the offices are limited to no more than 50% capacity, and to encourage online banking as well as working from home. offices are allowed to open for the same hours of 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., including banks. Shift work is encouraged for manufacturing and pharmaceutical industries, but pharmacy shops will continue to remain open overnight as required. The hours of 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. opening hours will remain relevant not only for offices and banks, but also for supermarkets. And we are also reducing the number of hours that restaurants can open through the same 8 a.m. to p.m. time limit. Clubs, bars, beer parlors, and gardens, etc. will remain closed, including recreational parks and communal sport areas. All schools are also to remain closed till further evaluation. State government and security agencies are enjoined to ensure effective and strict enforcement of these guidelines. I'll now briefly talk about Salah, because we're all going into Salah, and to say that COVID infection has not gone away. It is still very much with us. We really need to respect the guidelines, particularly those related to self-distancing rules and avoidance of mass gatherings. We should make sure that we use face masks as part of our Salah attire for this year. And I would like to call out particularly for those that are vulnerable to these infections, especially the elderly above the age of 65. If you are diabetic, if you have an underlying health problem, you have a personal responsibility for looking after your health. Do not put yourself at risk this Salah. COVID will go away eventually. The pandemic will go away. But we would like to be part of those that see it go away. There will be other Salahs. There will be other Salahs, but only if we are alive. If we are not, then really it becomes an issue. So as we celebrate Salah, let us not allow COVID to celebrate Salah with us. Let us commit to stay alive. Let us commit to protect ourselves and protect our loved ones from this infection. Thank you.
Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Honorable Chairman, honorable members of the House, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to give a brief update because we're coming to the end of the 14-day quarantine period for the first and second batch of evacuees. You'll recall that the first batch came in from Dubai. The second batch came in from London and came to Abuja. The first batch was in Lagos. And then we had the third batch that came in from New Jersey, from the US. We actually had a fourth batch that came in 2 days ago from Saudi Arabia. Nigerians who had gone for Umrah and who were caught there. There was some miscommunication as we were not ready at the time to receive anybody actually. But I must say, and I really congratulate our team, consultants who did a fantastic job with such late notice to gear up and receive 292 people, accommodate them and look after them, and they've settled down very well. So they did a fantastic job, our team did there. So as they've come to the end of the 14 days, I spoke to the Inspector General of Police today, and he was also very helpful because some of them will have to travel across state lines, and that has been a source of concern for them. But the IG of Police has directed the commissioners of police in the two cities in which they are located, that is Abuja and Lagos, to receive them individually and give them personalized passes and a phone number that they can reach if they have any problems at any of the borders going home. So we're hopeful that they will not have any issues as they go back. You know, of course, there are Nigerians still all over the world crying to come home, and we're doing everything we can. It's just not possible. We have those in India, in China, in South Africa, in Sudan, you know, and others who still want to come from the US, others who still want to come from the UK, from France, Turkey, you know, all over, you know, and it's just a huge challenge. So I urge them to continue to bear with us, be patient, because the reality is that you know, we can only process a certain number at any given time. All the different you know, facilities that are required to be in place, human resources as well, are limited. And so, you know, it's just a process, and you know, it pains us to know and to see that there are Nigerians out there who are really desperate and going through very difficult times and needing and wanting to come home. So we are going to continue to do everything possible to bring them back as quickly as possible. And with the promise of more resources that we have you know, received, hopefully that will enable us to be able now to quicken the process, because obviously hotels will refuse to take people until they see the money and that kind of thing. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more room for maneuver to enable us to bring more people in. But of course there's the, you know, constraints of human resources, because as you can see, as you have heard, the numbers are going up all the time of cases. So those in the country already that need to be isolated and so forth are also a big strain on our medical system, without even adding those who are coming home. So you know, so far so good, but there's still a lot more to be done, and a lot of our people out there still struggling and still suffering. But just to assure you and them that we will continue to fight for them and try to get them home as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. We will now move to this segment for questions. Are we ready? Yes, sir. Okay.
forces and other getting in their to continue with their spiritual activities. I want to ask, Minister, are we really on the same page with Kano State? Because if we keep talking about the extension of lockdown, which is the presidential order, and in the other hand, the Kano State is saying they are lifting the restriction. I think there is a contradiction here. What are you going to do concerning that issue so that that kind of issues will not keep coming up in order not to discourage the fight against COVID-19? One of the focal objectives of the Sustainable Development Goal has to do with development of health sector and provision of basic health services and well-being. To attain to this objective, the Abuja Declaration was made, and the African heads of government made a pledge among themselves to allocate 15% of their budgetary allocation to health sector. As I'm talking to you now, most of the African countries have not attained even up to 8%. And now with the COVID-19, how do you look at possibilities of attaining to this 15%? And as a body, WHO, what kind of engagement are you having with the African head of government to persuade them to see the reason of increasing budgetary allocation to health sectors? And secondly, not quite long, the US government has threatened to withdraw fundings for WHO, simply because of, as they say, the way the WHO is managing the COVID-19 fight. How are you managing this fight that makes United States government to feel not satisfactorily about it? Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. Rachel Abuja from the News Agency of Nigeria. My first question is for the Minister of Health. Sir, how can you assure Nigerians that the war on COVID-19 will not negatively affect the war against other diseases like TB, HIV, and viral hepatitis? Against other, then what measures are in place to fight these diseases simultaneously so that we will not lose the previous gains from those diseases? My next question is for the DG NCDC. So I would like to know how many gene experts we've converted in total, and I would also like to know the criteria for distributing this gene expert across Nigeria. This morning you made mention of, you gave criteria for discharge patients, COVID patients, that is just going to be a single test instead of 3. I would like to know why. Many thanks.
Mr. Chairman, members of the PTF, my colleagues, good afternoon. My name is Nancy Oyedia Orum from AIT. I want to start with Mr. DG, sir. Sir, some time ago, the Ministry of Health sent a delegation to Kano State to ascertain the cause of mysterious death in that state. And I'm aware that the local COVID-19 team in that state briefed the media and said most of the deaths in that state were COVID-19 related. So I want to know, why are those figures not captured in the national data of COVID-19 deaths in Nigeria? Mr. SGF, last week, I remember in one of your speeches, you said about 9 local government areas are the most affected. They have recorded the largest chunk of COVID-19 in Nigeria. So I want to know some of those states. And is it also possible that we can have curfew and lockdown in those specific areas, just as is attainable in other climes? Finally, sir, to the Foreign Affairs Minister, I know you've spoken so much about evacuating people from India, but I got a message from someone who is yet to be evacuated from India. He said he was privy to get information from the proprietors of isolation centers in Lagos and Abuja, and they were made to understand that before they will be isolated in their facilities, CBN and NNPC must pay 100% of all the monies. So the guy is asking, now that you've met the pledge, the CBN and NNPC have met the pledge, when exactly is evacuation going to start from India, looking at the fact that these people are ready to foot the bills? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kayla Megwa from Channels Television. And just to get a clarification from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the returnees from Saudi Arabia, are they in quarantine at this moment? Just to get that clarification from you. And my next question goes to the Minister of Health. Now, there's a 6-month import duty and VAT waivers that were approved for medical equipment and supplies early in May to combat the economic implications of COVID-19. And at the time, the Senate was asking that the gesture be extended to other drugs for hypertension, diabetes, anti-malaria drugs. Will this be done? And if it's being worked on right now, I just need clarification on that. Second question I have, the minister had also earlier told us that the evacuees, so he had complained that some of the evacuees that came back to the country were not complying with isolation center rules. You had stated that they were receiving visitors, etc. And you said you were going to tighten security around those isolation centers. Just to get clarification on if that has been done and if those evacuees are obeying the isolation rules right now. And then our final question is for the NCDC Director General. This question has to do with the elderly, people who live with the elderly at this moment. How should family members be living with the elderly at this time? Should the elderly isolate themselves? Can they still mix up with members of the family? And what particular workout regime should they be on at this moment? That's the question for the DG and CDC. Thank you very much.
Good evening, the SGF, honorable ministers, my colleagues. My name is Rahila Lassa. I report for Voice of Nigeria. My question is for the, I don't know, either the NCDC boards or environment. All right. I want to know what happens to the home or the house of a person who tests positive for COVID-19 after he has been taken to the isolation center. Is fumigation done, or is there a way that the house is disinfected? I'm asking this because the national coordinator has talked about stigmatization a lot. So I want to know so that people will have confidence to associate with the person after recovery. Thank you.
Good evening, sirs, SGF, honorable ministers, honorable lawmakers, and my colleagues. My name is Femi Akonde. I'm a reporter with TVC News. My question is to the task force, and maybe the SGF should take it. So we know, like you always say, the impact of this COVID-19 on the country's health and wealth. And a lot of businesses have been hit by this. But in Abuja, business owners are complaining. There's now a lot of them have been approached by the Environmental Service Department of the Abuja Municipal Council to fumigate their premises, their business premises, and it is mandatory. This particular invoice from the Abuja Municipal Area Council is even charging the owner of a supermarket as high as 2 million naira. And they say, kindly make payment not later than 1 week of receipt of this letter. Is it okay, sir? That's my question. And my next question is to the DG and CDC, sir. We know that as we ramp up testing, a lot of contact tracing is also done, sir. So in doing this contact tracing, you advise people who have come in contact with confirmed cases to self-isolate. But how do you monitor these people to ensure that truly they self-isolate? Because some people say that once the NCDC leaves their doorsteps, these people go about their normal lives, and maybe this could be one of the reasons why we're beginning to have community infection around the country. And to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, sir, you've already you talked about the people who would be ending their 14-day mandatory isolation very soon. You know, a lot of them are saying that maybe road travel might not be their thing, that could there be an arrangement for, let's say, a flight to take them out of Abuja? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman of the Task Force, members of the chair of the task force. My name is Emmanuel Kutara from Radio Nigeria. My first question goes to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. According to some reports, some Nigerians who arrived Cotonou from different European countries yesterday were being subjected to COVID-19 tests at 150 euros each after seizing their passports. They are right now in a hotel at their own expense. The question is, who takes responsibility for these Nigerians, or are they responsible for themselves? Because the embassy in Cotonou said they were not aware of their coming. For the chairman of the ad hoc committee on COVID infections, I would like to know your specific role in that committee. Also, the Minister of Health, you gave us an update on Cross Rivers. We want to know the update for Kogi State. Thank you.
The chairman, members of the task force, my colleagues. My name is Amaka Ude. I report for Rice News. And my question goes to the Minister of Health. So I want to know the kind of mental and nutritional care being given to people in the isolation centers. I ask this question because I've had an opportunity to interact with some people who have recovered from different states, and some of them had major complaints on the kind of mental care they were given. Some said no one even had any sort of talk with them to help them recover. So I would like to get your reaction to that. And also, earlier you spoke about a training being done for healthcare workers, and people living with disability, they want to know if this training also involves, this frontline workers learning to really take care of those with disabilities. And my final question goes to the national coordinator. So I got a message from some Nigerians who, unfortunately, they were stuck in a state different from where they reside prior to the lockdown order. So they are asking, they said they've been stuck where they traveled to for too long. They're asking the PTF if there's a way that the PTF can give them some sort of, freedom to go back to their place of residence, maybe a day or two sometime soon. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Kenneth Nanim. I work for NTA. It has been established globally that technology must be deployed in the fight against COVID-19. And my question is, what is the government doing as regards to installation of human decontamination facilities in public places like schools, hospitals, or markets, as part of preparation plans towards the full reopening of the economy, so that people who walk into an establishment or office or market, will have themselves decontaminated, then we have it at both entry and exit points. We want to know if government is thinking in that direction, and if government is thinking in this direction, is government making use of indigenous technology to drive this? Thank you.
Good evening, members of the PTF. My name is Juliana Taiwo Balonye of the Sun newspapers. My first question goes to the Minister of Education. Sir, your ministry has been accused by the visually impaired people of abandoning their community. They are asking for learning aids, most especially to ensure that they are carried along in the online schooling going on currently. So they want to know how soon you will attend to their request, sir. The DG NCDC has answered my question on luxury bus, but the luxury bus owners, but they want the coordinator to give them timeline for plan resumption, just like it's been done with aviation, that is resuming early June. The SGF, sir, there are concerns about flaws and lack of transparency by government agency in the procurement of PPEs and other health equipment in fighting COVID-19. The new PPE procurement guidelines has expunged the provisions that requires CSOs and professional groups to be observers in bid opening rounds. Does this worry you post-COVID? In terms of corruption, does it worry you? And what will be your, what will you do to address that, to address the concerns of Nigerians that they might witness corruption post-COVID? Sorry, thank you.
Good afternoon, sir, SGF, honorable ministers, and my colleagues. Sir, I have two things I want to say here, and I want to appeal to the Minister of Information and Culture to please answer in Yoruba and also in English, because I'm going to ask in Yoruba and also in English. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I want to suggest, sir, because we went throughout, let me say, like 13 states in this country, and we found out that the transporters, they are not doing according to what we have said here. And most of them, if you ask them questions, they will tell you that is what the government said we should be doing. They carry 3 people at the back of their cars. Some will not put on face masks. Some have even increased their transport fare. And that transport fare now is not even affecting the market. The food items we are buying before has increased with almost 150%. And all the excuses is always on COVID-19. So what are we supposed to do about it? I'm suggesting maybe we can call these unions to order. Maybe they can speak the language they will understand. Maybe they couldn't understand our language. Maybe their union can speak to them and they will understand better than we. And also, we can also, the Ramadan festival is coming very close and very near by this weekend. I would be surprised that we will see many elderly people that will tell you that they need to go and pray. They need to go and celebrate. So I think the Ministry of Information have a work to do in this area to sensitize them the importance of staying at home. Then my second question is about education. Sorry, my 2 sons are at home. They are asking me, Mommy, when are we going back to school? And they told me yesterday that they saw it in one of the dailies that said in 2 weeks' time. They want to confirm. I don't have any answer to give them. So the only thing I told them is that by the time I get here today, I will ask the question to confirm. Are they resuming in 2 weeks' time? Yes or no? Then in Yoruba, sir, ìbéèrè tí kọ́kọ́ sọ ó dàbí ìbéèrè ó dẹ̀ tún máa bá òní wípé púpọ̀ lọ́rọ̀ ọ̀rọ̀ tá à ń sọ ń bì báyìí àwọn awakọ̀ wa wọn ò gbọ́ dáadáa ó dàbí pé kò yé wọn tó tàbí kó jẹ́ pé wọ́n fẹ́ máa ṣe ìfẹ́ inú ara wọn a rí i pé púpọ̀ nù wọn ò ní gbé èèyàn méjì sẹ́yìn èèyàn 3 èèyàn 4 ló ń gbé l'Àbújá débi wípé owó orí ọkọ̀ gan ó ti wá pé lésì tó di pé ó ti wá ń kó bá ọjà tí à ń rà tó jẹ́ pé à ń jẹ débi wípé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ ló jẹ́ pé kò lè ra oúnjẹ gan tó nǹkan tó máa jẹ nínú ilé mọ́. Mo wá dábàá wípé ilé-iṣẹ́ àṣà àti ìròyìn lórílẹ̀‐èdè Nàìjíríà yìí tẹ́ ń jẹ́ mínísítà ẹ̀ ó yẹ lè ní nǹkan kan tẹ́ lè bá wa ṣe sí débi wípé èdè tó máa yé wọn wọ́n á lè bá wọn sọ àti pé àwọn ẹgbẹ́ wọn àjọ wọn tó ń rí sí ayédáadé wọn bóyá èdè táwọn yẹn máa sọ ó máa túbọ̀ yé wọn ju èdè táwa ń sọ níbí báyìí lọ. Èkejì tí mo wá sọ nípa ti ètò ẹ̀kọ́ a rí pé àwọn ọmọ wa kan tó wà nílé wọ́n wò pé ìgbà wo làwọn fẹ́ padà lọ sílé ìwé wọ́n ní lórí ìwé ìròyìn kan lánàá wọ́n rí pé ní ọ̀sẹ̀ méjì sákòókò tá a wà yìí wọ́n máa padà sílé ìwé wọ́n á ń béèrè pé ṣé bẹ́ẹ̀ ni àbí bẹ́ẹ̀ kọ́. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. We have taken the questions. We'll be taking responses from the Honorable Minister of Health, the DG NCDC, the National Coordinator, the WHO representative, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Minister of State Education, Honorable Minister, Information and Culture. Then we will invite the Chairman of the House Committee, Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19 to the podium to say a few words and to answer the question posed to him before the SGF rounds it up. So, Honorable Minister of Health, we begin with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The clarification I got here from Kayla. The waiver on drugs and medication generally follows the purpose. Most times when organizations bring medication for humanitarian purposes, they are not for sale. They apply for a waiver, and the ministry considers it, and if we are convinced that it's for humanitarian purposes, a waiver is given. Of course, everything coming in now in connection with COVID-19 will fall into that category. There are waivers that will be given straight away for anything that has to do with the COVID-19. As for routine medication, drugs that have been donated and again brought by organizations that want to use it for the poor and vulnerable apply for a waiver. Those that are coming in for commercial purposes, those who are doing business, have a rate that they pay to customs. So it doesn't depend on what you are importing, it depends on the purpose and also on the destination. As for the war against COVID-19, if it doesn't affect others, that's a very good question. It's a question we have been trying to address here all the time. And the main reason is that either people are too focused on COVID that they actually begin to forget that other diseases are there, or as it happened in many places, when a few healthcare workers got infected, they deserted their positions out of fear. And the result was that people who had other problems, who had malaria, people who were going for antenatal, for immunization, were beginning to suffer the brunt. So that is why the government has been doing everything to remind healthcare givers, healthcare providers that it is important to remember other things are still there. Malaria has not been gone away because COVID is here, and the routine services of immunization. So on all the messages we make here, you'll notice that we often emphasize the continuation of essential services, of routine services. And all the teams, ministerial teams that have gone on visit outside of Abuja have also included persons from the primary health care agency and also persons from family health to go and help to stimulate routine service delivery in those areas, including also representatives of public health. So it's very important, and I use this opportunity now to remind all levels of healthcare provision, local government, state, and also tertiary, that the continuation of care must not be compromised, and that you use efficient triage to distinguish between those who are there for routine, and if you suspect COVID-19, you know what to do by now. I think the message has gone round. The other question is about evacuee compliance. Yes, there are issues with compliance, although the part of the conversation we had with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is that those who are leaving their foreign countries to come here will be made to understand that they are going to be in a quarantine for 14 days. And in some cases, I believe they are made to sign that they understand that and they accept it. It's a condition for being able to board the flight. It's a requirement for the country. It is a requirement for 200 million Nigerians to protect them. So if you agree, then you come along. And once you have agreed and put down a signature, we believe that as a gentleman, as a lady, you keep to your word and also comply with the 14-day compliance instead of trying to abscond. And I believe that probably only very, very few actually have ever done that. And the need for policing is not there, but the security in all of these places that's provided. Now, the other question is about Kogi State. Yes, we are going to engage Kogi State. I shall be speaking with His Excellency, the Governor, very soon. We have a good relationship, and the first trip was not successful. The second one, I'm sure, will be. The trip to Cross River State by the team as I said, as I reported just now, went very well. So connection has been restored, and the connection between all the agencies of government like NCDC, primary health care, and all the departments with Cross River State is there. We have been able to see what they have been doing inside their country. They are producing a lot of masks. I'm told that compliance with mask wearing is very high all over the places they went to in the capital city. So we see that something was going on there, and we wish them well, and that they continue in that way. With the mental health, yes, that was a very good point too. The mental health issue in isolation, especially for those who stay a little bit longer, because if you know you are going to stay 14 days and you are tested, you are not yet quite that way. Some people do get a little bit unstable, or those who have other plans and suddenly discover that they can't continue with what they wanted to do get, some of them get depressed. So the mental health issue is under consideration. It's very well developed in Lagos because they have been at it for a longer time than others. And it's also been developed in other states to have psychologists create things to give distraction to those who are in isolation. And if you look at some clips going around, you see that there are dances and things that are organized for those who are fit enough to participate. The other question was about frontline workers and disabilities. Now, as far as COVID is concerned, disability has nothing to do with it, because either you are infected or you are not. So if you are infected, you'll be given exactly the same treatment, and the testing and the surveillance that goes on equally for everybody. It doesn't take consideration of your physical status. So there's no, whether poor or rich, there's no discrimination according to the physical features. I think I've already spoken about the waiver. For the disinfection, if you go to isolation centers, particularly if you go to the dome, which is being prepared now for admission, it has been formally accepted administratively. They have a medical superintendent, and the team is being built up. You will see that they have protocol there for healthcare workers, how they are hosed down, and how they change, and where they don, and where they doff the clothes. When they are leaving, they doff, and where they are coming, where they wash their hands. So these protocols are there. They may not be necessarily mechanized, as you may have been seeing in some clips, but there are systems that are there to make sure that you come in and you prepare yourself, you are safely attired to enter, and then when you come out, you are safely prepared to drop your dress and also your gowns, and then also prepare yourself to go home and be on your own. Thank you. I think those are the questions that we have.
So thank you very much. Just a few questions. One on the gene expert. We have about 400 gene expert machines across the country. Not all of them are appropriate for COVID. We need those that have a biosafety cabinets where they are located. And we also need those that are functional. Some of them have been around for quite a while. So we had to prioritize, so we'll continue to do this. 17 of them are immediately ready for deployment in the first phase. That first phase will start next week. I'm happy to announce that our first set of Gene Expert cartridges will arrive in Nigeria on the 25th of May. It's the first time I'm able to actually say a date. So this is thanks to all the people that have been working very hard behind the scenes to make this happen. So once the flow starts, we'll continue from there, and we'll continue to expand. So we'll start with 17 sites, starting with, a lot of criteria in deciding who gets first. Firstly, in states where they don't have any lab at all, and secondly, in states where they have a high number of cases. So we'll go to states that have a high number of cases and no existing lab at the moment, and start from there. And then we'll scale. So from next week, that aspect of our testing strategy will start expanding, and we'll see continuous increase from there. On our discharge criteria, we changed it from 2 tests 24 hours apart or 48 hours apart to a single negative test. The reason is that most of our cases that tested negative, also tested negative for the second time. So we found out that, you know, of course there will be some exceptions, but in most cases, once they tested the negative the first time, the second test was also negative. And given the pressure we have on bed spaces, especially in Lagos, Kano, and FCT, we made a pragmatic decision to move to one negative test as sufficient to discharge people. There will always be exceptions where this is not appropriate, and of course, this is dependent on your being clinically cleared of symptoms. So if you're still symptomatic, then of course this doesn't apply to you. In terms of adding the deaths in Kano to our national database at the moment is based on virologically confirmed cases, so cases confirmed on PCR. Once the results of the Kano study are completely verified, we will note them, but we will not include them in our database because of the difference in methods in estimating the number of people infected and have died in that particular context. In terms of the elderly and how to look after them, you know, we can't be completely prescriptive about this because unlike in many parts of Western Europe and the West, where many people live in older people's homes and you can regulate that fairly efficiently, our elderly live very often in our communities, in the villages, sometimes at home with us. So the key thing is to protect them, to limit access of people to them as much as possible. That limiting access might mean, listen, if they're in the village and you're very attached to your parents and you have an urge to visit them fairly frequently, please send them money or send them whatever they need to survive and avoid visiting them for some time. And this might sound counterintuitive, but by visiting them less, you're doing more for them at this point in time than anything else you might be able to do. So please send them food, whatever presents you want to, but it's better to leave them where they are right now. And even if they're living with you, to limit contact to the outside world. I know that's very difficult because the elderly are often the most frail and require a lot of support. So we all have to find a way of managing. But this is really not simple. And one of those things government cannot be very prescriptive about because we all have to manage the circumstances ourselves a little bit. The question about houses. I've said this very often. The most important thing in our homes when there's someone infected is wiping surfaces with bleach and water. You know, we have a very simple solution. 1 component bleach, 199 components of water, or you mix half a glass in 1 gallon of water and get a very effective medium to clean surfaces. So once the surfaces are clean, actually, you have done 99% of the work. So, you know, this is really what it takes. It's not some magic. I know we fumigate and all of that, which is always good for many other reasons. But in this particular case, to make sure that we avoid transmission of the virus, there are two main modes of transmission. One is from droplets. That's why we're all wearing masks. And secondly is from surfaces that we touch and leave the virus there. So if you use bleach and water, you kill most of the viruses on the surfaces. And finally, I think there was the question on contact tracing and how we can make sure that people are doing what we say they should do while they're isolating. I come back to what I always say. You have to take responsibility. None of us at NCDC or the PTF or the police is going to go put cameras in your homes to make sure that you're actually doing what you should be doing yourself to save your own life and to save the lives of your family members. So really, this is about people taking personal responsibility and not to impress us or to make anybody happy, but to save your own life, save the lives of your family, your loved ones, the vulnerable people in your own community, and help us control this outbreak. So really, that's the essence. Contact tracing in this sense is not really tracing in order to enforce. It's tracing so that you can be offered the information that you need to do what you need to do to save lives of yourselves and others. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I have 3 questions. So the first one has to do with whether or not the PTF is working with certain state governments and why do we have a disconnect. in terms of the advice we give? Well, first of all, I would like to say that the containment measures that we advise are always take into cognizance the social, the economic, the religious, the cultural implications of those measures. In addition to that, we know that the effectiveness of the measures really depends on their acceptability, the buy-in by the public, by the communities. Whenever the PTF puts out guidance, it's never done in isolation to the state governments. We always tell them in advance what our likely recommendations will be. If we get approval from Mr. President, we go back to them and tell them what part of the recommendations have been approved or not. We'll continue to work with the state governments to make sure that whatever is put in place is in the best interest of their citizens. We're in the business of saving lives. When it comes to restrictions, I'd like to first of all give you an example. Saudi Arabia, for instance, I'm sure some of you are aware. They've had about 240 deaths. They've had 40-something thousand infections. So their case fatality rate is much, much lower than that of Nigeria. But what have they done? They've actually they're planning to completely lock down the country, 24-hour lockdown for the 5 days during the period of the Eid. Have we had any Umrah this year? No. Are we likely to have Hajj? We probably won't. So we are living in unusual situations. We are living in unusual times. And as far as we know, from the point of view of government, the role of government is to protect the life of their citizens and ensure their well-being. In this regard, we will continue to work with the state governments, but we are also pushing towards a different approach as we move on to the next phase of the pandemic. We're going to insist on state governments starting to take ownership of the response. We will support them in taking decisions. We'll provide them with the best guidance based on the data available, but we will not continue to drive this response centrally from the federal side. We expect state governments to have the capacity to be able to implement those measures required to safeguard the lives of their people. So in this regard, as far as we are concerned, state governors will continue to have that responsibility as we move forward, but we hope that we'll be able to work very closely with them and make the best use of science and also consider the different socio-cultural and religious aspects of those communities when we enforce guidelines. And again, I would like to make the public aware that as we go into Salah and any other public holiday period where people congregate, where people visit each other, in a pandemic situation where the epidemic is clearly going into the exponential phase, not only is it risky, but it is unwise for you to go into large groups of people without any protection, with no face mask, without respecting physical distancing, putting aside all the mass gatherings. You're asking for trouble. And that trouble will not come immediately. It will come in the following weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, when that large congregation of people end up being infected. And in the long run, do you want to be alive for the next Salah, or do you want to enjoy this Salah, especially if you are at risk, and then possibly not be around for next year? Is it going to be one big bang and then you're gone? Or do you want to delay things considering the unusual circumstances we're in and continue to enjoy future Salahs with your loved ones? So I'll keep it at that for now. Issue of travel. Nigerians are stuck for travel. Well, I wouldn't mind traveling as well, but we've already said there are restrictions for traveling, and we will only allow essential travel. I know there's a lot of pressure to allow Nigerians to travel for these holidays. We are possibly going into 4 or 5 day holiday period. But we will consider each case separately on an individual basis, and we'll take a decision on that. But certainly there won't be any massive approvals for travel. Timelines for planned resumption. So this doesn't just apply to the transport sector, it applies to businesses across the board. We are trying to open up the economy. I'm talking on the optimistic side when I say in the coming weeks, we are urging businesses to now start preparing for opening up, because we hope our economy and our country will start running again very soon. But now is the time over the next few weeks to start preparing. If you are an office setup, or you are a business, or you are a bank, you need to look at your sitting arrangements. You need to make sure that if you are receiving customers, that you respect those guidelines, because we will continue to enforce them even as we open up the economy. So please do start preparing, and hopefully in the coming weeks, we hope to move towards normality. Thank you.
The Chair of the Task Force, members of the Presidential Task Force, the honorable members from the House of Representatives, ladies and gentlemen. I had a question related to the Abuja Declaration and how WHO is working with governments towards the achievement of that target. So as you'll all recall, in April of 2001, the heads of state of the African Union countries met and pledged to allocate 15% of their annual budgets to the health sector. And 19 years down the road, a few countries have met that target. Some are on track, and a number of countries have not made progress. And with the coming of the COVID pandemic, we are definitely seeing that our health systems are stretched. And there's never been a time like this that the investment is more evident as a necessary investment. And it's not just in primary health care towards achieving universal health coverage, but also health security, to ensure that we have systems that can rapidly detect diseases of epidemic potential and be placed to respond aggressively to mitigate the effects of these outbreaks. WHO is working at all levels, right from the global level, to advocate for investments in health. We are a champion of universal health coverage, and we've worked through platforms like the G7, G20, the World Health Assembly platforms, and at the regional level through the African Union and regional committees on health, really just to push the message that we must invest more in health systems to be able to achieve universal health coverage and health security. We also are working with partners to continue to generate evidence on the impact or the effectiveness of investments in health towards reducing mortality. And all this is really to galvanize the support from governments as the drivers of health programs in countries to invest in health. A question was posed on the funding, the halt in funding from the United States to WHO and its impacts. I'd just like to mention, indeed, the United States has been a long-standing partner and friend of WHO, and we hope that it will continue to do so, or to be so. We regret the decision of the President of the United States to halt funding to WHO. With support from the people and government of the United States, WHO really works to improve the health of many of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people. WHO is reviewing the impact of the halt on our work and any withdrawal of US funding, and will be working hard with partners to fill the financial gaps we face and ensure that at this critical time that the work continues uninterrupted. I would also like to mention that at the just concluded 73rd World Health Assembly that held on 18th to 19th of May, that included ministers of health from around the world, the 194 member states, as well as heads of state from 14 countries. The consistent message throughout the meeting was that global unity is the most powerful tool to combat the COVID outbreak. A resolution was adopted at the Assembly for intensification of efforts to control the pandemic and for equitable access and fair distribution of all health technologies to combat the virus. The Assembly also called for an independent and comprehensive evaluation of the global response, and WHO will be initiating an independent evaluation at the earliest opportunity to review the experience gained and the lessons we have learned, and to make recommendations to improve national and global pandemic preparedness and response. Thank you.
We shall take further responses from the Honorable Minister of State Education, followed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Honorable Minister Information and Culture. Honorable Minister of State Education.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, everybody. There are two quick questions. The first one has to do with our Braille students. I did explain a few days ago that for our impaired students, there are no online provisions for Braille that is available. But I will believe that all Braille students would have taken home what they call the Braille pack, and that's what we can work with at the moment. The online services that have been provided can't actually deliver Braille. So at the moment, we deeply apologize to students who are visually impaired that what they have are the packs that they took home at the limits of what we can do at the moment. We then will address the issue of when we can reopen. I'm sure when Uncle Lai comes on board, he will tell you that we all are seriously interested in reopening, and we believe we will reopen soon. But I can't confirm that what your children said, that we can open in 2 weeks. The issue around reopening has nothing to do with the availability of the schools or not. It has a lot to do with national governance. The idea of shutting down the schools is not anything to do with the schools per se. The national body, and you hear the SGF, the chairman, keeps saying, is a national response. There's a single national response. And everything we do flows from that. When they determine, I'm sure you've seen all the experts on this side. When they determine that there's a measure of safety to which we can expose our children, we will gladly do that. We are watching and we are working with all bodies within and outside the country. The 5 countries of WAEC are meeting. I've just come off a meeting with the AU Ministers of Education, where everybody is as concerned as you are. We hope to reopen very soon. This morning, I met with Ministry of Science and Technology. We're looking at putting measures in place that can disinfect every child as he goes into a school and disinfect him as he goes out. If we resource our schools properly, we can begin to reopen. But we must be able to ensure that the children go in safe and come out safe and not become conduits for further infection in the society. I think that's principally what we would like to do. But keep the dates open for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I had, I think, 4 questions, actually. And the first one was in respect of India and how soon we can start bringing our nationals in India back home, especially that some hotels have said that they want to see the money before they accept anybody. And now we're hopeful of getting the money. Yes, we're hoping very soon to start bringing the evacuees from India, as I said. And I understand from the, I was informed that it might require advance notice of some days, I think 8 days, before they give the landing rights in India. So we're working on that, and we hope to have them with us soon. The second one was whether the Saudi evacuees who arrived, or the Nigerians from Saudi Arabia who arrived 2 days ago, are under quarantine, and the answer to that is yes, that they are under quarantine. Then there was a question of air travel for the evacuees. Yes, I mean, we will bring them back by air, but there's a list of different countries that are waiting to be evacuated. So it's not, all the, I mean, we can't evacuate all the countries at the same time. Then there was a question regarding Cotonou, Benin. Some Nigerians who have arrived there, and what the situation is that they were asked to pay for tests, and they were taken to a hotel for quarantine where they're having to pay. I was in touch with our ambassador there, and he's informed me that there are 8 Nigerians who arrived on the flight. They actually originated from Berlin, Germany. And he has been in touch with the Beninois authorities and the evacuees, and is making arrangements to have them transported to Nigeria. He's not aware that they were made to pay an exorbitant amount for the test. But I have been in touch, so he got in touch with immigration people at the border, and waiting to hear from them. I subsequently got in touch with our Consul General, Controller General of Immigration, and he's assured me that he's given directives for the border officials to allow them in, and they will also now make arrangements for quarantine for them when they are in. So the matter is being addressed very quickly. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, Information and Culture.
The Chairman and the Vice Chairman, House Ad hoc Committee on COVID-19, the Chairman, PTF COVID-19, honorable ministers, members of the task force, gentlemen of the press. You will recall that a few days ago I was here when I gave you the latest outcome of the annual polls, which actually confirmed that over 99% of Nigerians are aware of COVID-19, and that more than 95% have actually heard about the precautions that they need to take, such as physical hygiene, not congregating, social distancing, and the like. But yet, it's possible that some Nigerians, despite being aware of COVID-19, despite having heard about what they ought to do, have refused to accept, for whatever reasons, that COVID-19 is not only real, but it's taking away many lives. And that is the case of the issue of some road transport workers who have refused to heed to the advice and recommendations of the PTF, especially as regards how many passengers they should carry. We will continue to engage with them, and I'm glad that both the National Coordinator and I think Minister of Health said that we are constantly talking to the state governments and asking them to take ownership and possession of this fight. We've also encouraged them to engage with the National Union of Road Transport Workers and all other stakeholders. And I think that will be that's probably the most effective way of getting down this message to the grassroots. We need to carry along, we need to convince associations and unions on the need to convince their people that not only is COVID-19 real, it is very, very dangerous. Even today, at the PTF meeting earlier today, we reinforced the need to continue to work with subnationals, local government chairmen, state governors. But like the National Coordinator said, we cannot micromanage from the center here, what happens in the state. But we will continue to encourage the governors to engage these various associations. And one positive thing is that when you get like the IRTW involved in this kind of campaign, they have a mechanism which is very efficient and very effective to compel their people to obey their own regulations. So we will not stop, we will continue to engage them through the governors and through the local government chairman. On the issue of prices that have gone up, once again, I think it's the same approach. We need to talk to the National Union of Road Transport Workers and other similar associations that this is a time for compassion. Yes, COVID-19 has affected and impacted negatively on every sector of the economy, everybody's lives. But if you look at what is going on in other parts of the world, this is precisely the time that people are giving back to society. I listen to news from every part of the world, and I see how companies that normally, manufacture perfumes are today now manufacturing sanitizer and giving them away almost free of charge. So I think we want to call on our compatriots not to take the opportunity of COVID-19 to further oppress or further make life difficult for their compatriots, but look at it a time of sacrifice so that we can all come back together stronger from this COVID-19 pandemic. As to the issue of whether schools are going to reopen or not, I think the Honorable Minister of State Education has answered. No, it's not true that in 2 weeks' time, the schools will be opened. So you are going to be at home for more than 2 weeks with your sons. I think now I can explain in Yoruba. Ẹ ṣé púpọ̀. Ní àkọ́kọ́, ẹ fi yé wa wípé àwọn oníṣẹ́ mọ́tò, àwọn tó ń wa mọ́tò àti àwọn tí wọ́n ní mọ́tò, ó dàbẹ̀ ni pé etí ikún ni wọ́n kọ sí gbogbo nǹkan tí ìjọba ń gbà wọ́n ní àmọ̀ràn. Pàtàkì jùlọ wípé wọn ò gbọ́dọ̀ gbé ju èèyàn mẹ́ta tó bá jẹ́ pé taxi ni ẹnìkan wájú èèyàn méjì lẹ́yìn, tó bá jẹ́ pé kẹ̀kẹ́ napep ni wọn ò gbọ́dọ̀ gbé ju méjì lọ. Ṣùgbọ́n ó dàbẹ̀ ni pé bí ẹ ṣe sọ wọn ò tẹ̀lé ìlànà yìí. Wọ́n tó mẹ́rin márùn nínú taxi, wọ́n sì tóbi márùn náà nínú kẹ̀kẹ́ napep. tó àárọ̀ wọn náà ni nítorí ọ̀rọ̀ wọn dàbí wọn ni wọ́n ń torí àjàjà àjàyíta ló ń jà lẹ́kùnlé òun ni nítorí wọn tí nítorí aráàlú ni ìjọba fi ṣe ètò yìí nítorí pé COVID-19 yìí kò mọ̀ pé ẹnìkan ló kéré tàbí ẹnìkan ló tóbi o kò sí ẹni tí ò lè kó ojú ìjà kọ ìmọ̀ràn ìjọba wípé kí a má máa pọ̀ nínú mọ́tò nítorí nǹkan kan kọ́ nítorí ara wa ni pàtàkì jùlọ ẹni tó wa mọ́tò fún rẹ̀ gan ó gan lè kó àrùn yìí tí ò bá gbọ́n tí ìjọba ń sọ ṣùgbọ́n a mọ̀ wípé wọ́n ní atọ́kùn wọn sì ni àjọ tó ń ṣe gbogbo ètò àwọn onímọ́tò tá à ń pè ní National Union of Road Transport Workers àwọn gómìnà wa àtàwọn council chairman wa wọ́n ti ń bá wọn sọ̀rọ̀ pé kán jọ kán pe àwọn èèyàn wọn wọ́n sì sọ fún wọn wípé gbogbo ohun tí ìjọba gbogbo ìlànà ìjọba yìí ò nítorí tiwọn torí ti aráàlú ni kò sí ní tí ìjọba fẹ́ gbà nípa pé kó má gbé ju èrò méjì mẹ́ta lọ. ẹ tún fi wá wípé ó dàbẹ̀ ni pé wọ́n ti fi lé owó mọ́tò wọ́n sọ pé torí kí pẹ́pẹ́sẹ́ o COVID-19 ló jẹ́ kí gbogbo nǹkan wọn kò sí ẹni tí COVID-19 kò sí ẹni tí ó kàn ó kàn nílé ó kàn àlejò ni o ó kàn lówó ó kàn tálíkà ni o ṣùgbọ́n àsìkò yìí ló yẹ kí a fi ìfẹ́ hàn fún ara wa tẹ́ bá rí bó ṣe ń ṣe lókè òkun àwọn tó ní wọ́n fi àsìkò yìí ran àwọn tí ò ní lọ́wọ́ ni kò kí ń ṣe pé àsìkò yìí láti máa wá ní ara wa ní ara a tún máa bẹ àwọn èèyàn ọjọ́ bíbẹ̀ kánjọ kan bá àwọn èèyàn wa sọ̀rọ̀ nítorí tí wọ́n bá ti ń fi lé owó mọ́tò owó oúnjẹ náà tún máa wọ́n gbogbo nǹkan ní ó gbowó lórí kì í ṣe àsìkò yìí ló yẹ ká nira wa lára àsìkò yìí ó yẹ ká fi àánú hàn, ká fi ìfẹ́ hàn fún ra wa ni. Láìpẹ́ láì jù lágbára Ọlọ́run, a ní pẹ́ tí a fi borí àìsàn yìí. Nípa ti pé àwọn ọmọ iléèwé wọ́n ó bẹ̀rẹ̀ iléèwé ní ọ̀sẹ̀ méjì, irọ́ ńlá ni o. Mínísítà ètò ẹ̀kọ́ ti fi tó yín létí, sì ti fẹ́ náà rẹ̀ ti pé kì í ṣe àwọn skul ni wọ́n ti iléèwé wọn o. N tó dé lónìí ká wá pé òun o. Tá a bá sì ní ìdánilójú wípé àrùn yìí ó ń lọọ́lẹ̀, ká sì ṣe àwọn ètò tó yẹ pé tí àwọn bá padà lọ sí skul kò ní jẹ́ pé tí wọ́n gbé lọ nílé tí wọn ò gbé lọ nílé ni wọ́n gbé padà. Ó dìgbà náà ká tó sí àwọn iléèwé wa. Ṣùgbọ́n à ń bá gbogbo àwọn principal náà là ń bá sọ̀rọ̀ àti àwọn headmaster. Gbogbo wọn là ń bá wọn sọ̀rọ̀ wípé tó kí wọ́n ní sùúrù. Tí wọ́n bá ní sùúrù tá a bá lè yanjú ọ̀rọ̀ yìí, nígbà yẹn ni àwọn ọmọ iléèwé ni wọ́n máa tó padà wá sí iléèwé. Ṣùgbọ́n ẹ jẹ́ ká tún rọra wa wípé ọ̀rọ̀ tó wà nílẹ̀ yìí o, ọ̀rọ̀ ìjọba kọ́ o, ọ̀rọ̀ Nàìjíríà nìkan sì kọ́, ọ̀rọ̀ gbogbo àgbáyé ni. COVID tó wà Nàìjíríà náà ló wá lu òyìnbó o, kò yàtọ̀ o, torí kò sí àwàdà tí àwọn aráàlú wa tí wọn ò máa fi COVID-19 ṣe. Ìkan ó ní òun ti fi sínú gàrí, òun ti mú, kò lè ṣe nǹkan kan. Irọ́ ni o, wọ́n dá wọn lóhùn o. Ọlọ́run ọba yóò jẹ́ kí àsìkò yìí kó kọjá, kó jẹ́ pé àwa la máa kọ ìtàn COVID, kí COVID kó má kọ ìtàn wa. Ẹ ṣé púpọ̀.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Information and Culture. I now invite the Chairman, House Committee on COVID-19, Honorable Dr. Michelle.
Thank you very much. My colleague from the National Assembly, the Vice Chair of COVID-19, the Chairman of the Presidential Task Force, who doubles as the Secretary to the Federal Government, my friend and schoolmate, Barrister Boss Gida Mustafa, other members of the Presidential Task Force, the very important members of the fourth realm of the estate. May I begin by saying that we are here in observer status. And even if I have not been asked a question, that question asked, I would have responded to it anyway. I want to say that Mr. Speaker, Right Honorable Femi Bajabiamila and the leadership of the House felt it necessary to have a committee dedicated to COVID-19. One, to support, underline the word support, the Presidential Task Force, so that they can operate in line with international best practices. This is a loaded statement. Two, to add value to the Presidential Task Force and all other relevant MDAs, particularly in strengthening systems and capacity so that there will be resilience and in future will be able to tackle this type of crisis without too much of problems. Thirdly, to ensure that doctors, nurses, other health workers are, one, protected. Because if they are not protected, we will not have people to continue caring for COVID patients and other patients. And two, the benefits that have accrued to them that have honorably earned should be paid as at when due. Finally, we are to act like a link between the Presidential Task Force, the National Assembly, and of course, the Nigerian people, to whom we are all accountable. Now, I want to say a small thing about what is happening generally, and I'm sure we've been answering so many questions. The DG NCDC did mention a little bit about it. The Minister for Information, of course, who is the mouthpiece of the government. I want to appeal to our press to make the message very simple. Not too much grammar. COVID-19 is a disease where when 100 people are infected, 80 of them will not even know they are infected. And yet, they will be spreading the disease. This is very, very important. The remaining 20, 15 of them will have mild to heavy catarrh, and they will recover. So you are left with only 5 people out of the 100 that will have very serious illness that might require intensive care. Now, the picture of COVID has flashed on our social media, televisions, and so on from abroad are people on respirators. They are a small percentage. But what the Nigerian people must understand, and I want at this point as a politician appeal to the teeming supporters of Mr. President, the National Assembly members, governors, chairmen, and even councillors down below, to please be patient and continue to obey the instructions as given out by the Presidential Task Force. Because these 80 people that feel well, they will be spreading the disease. And eventually, they might catch people that are vulnerable. We have been told over and over and over is the elderly and people with underground background medical issues. So please, people should continue to be patient. I have seen it time without number on Facebook and so many platforms that why is our COVID-19 different from abroad? It is not different. The only difference is that there, people that are positive and well are disciplined and they are patient. And once you are patient, within a couple of weeks or thereabout, you will be free after you have been tested. And we want to use this opportunity to appeal as politicians to the common man to be patient. Follow these instructions and the confusion will go away. Now there is a common Chinese proverb which says, Wei Dei. Even though COVID-19 started in China, Wei means danger, Dei means opportunity. One of our main reasons for being here is that in this danger that we are facing, there are opportunities in strengthening the system, which is in so many MDAs. There are more than 7 or 8 ministries here. And we will parley with all of them. Where the systems need to be strengthened, the Honorable Speaker is interested, we will make sure those systems are strengthened so that in future we will face dangers like this without too many problems. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, House Committee on COVID-19. I now invite the Chairman of the PTF to the podium.
Thank you so much. I was just looking for an information that would answer a particular question about the number of local governments. Chukwe, have you put that on your website? Okay, you put the states that are burdened. So probably you need to update that so that they can have the information of the specific local governments. If you go to the website of the Center for Disease Control, you will see the number of local governments that are listed there that are considered heavy burden, that constitute about 51%. The figure, I mean, the percentage would have changed with the increase in number, but substantially 9 local governments as of the time we spoke to the nation on Monday. The details will also be there, so that gives you a picture of the high burden areas. And the second leg of the question is whether we are considering some restrictive lockdowns in particular areas. It was contained in my remarks on Monday, quite explicit, that the next stage we are going into would involve localized lockdown, as it's been done in several parts of the country. There are countries that even localize their lockdown to cities because of the high burden nature of the infection in those cities. And the simple reason why that must be done, and we'll continue to pursue that agenda, is so that we can deal with the level of infections. And I'm glad that the chairman of the ad hoc committee from the House of Reps, being a medical doctor and an all-time friend and schoolmate, did emphasize the fact that 80%, like we have consistently mentioned on this platform, will be infected, will feel well, and that accounts for some of the attitudes you see in the isolation centers. And 20%, of that 20%, a certain percentage would have exhibited the symptoms. 15%, 5% will be the critical, that might need critical care, and eventually some percentage of that are the ones that go on the ventilators. The biggest fear is, who do you know will fall within the 5%? And that is why it is a national response, so that you can safeguard even the slightest of the proportion of the people that will eventually need hospital care. And from experiences of other countries, it's been very, very clear that people that fall within a particular age bracket. But the virus, being a novel virus, has also demonstrated. Initially, we thought that it would not afflict people below a certain age. But we've seen that even in infants, there have been cases. So because of the novelty of this virus, we keep working at catch-up, trying to catch up with the expressions and the conduct of the virus. To further emphasize the message today, we must do everything to safeguard and protect that percentage. The argument out there is that you open up markets, offices, and congregational gatherings are still being restricted. My answer to that is that a lot of the people that will go to the congregational meetings will not go to the market, because they have people that will do the market stuff for them. Some of them have stopped going to offices because they have retired. Statutorily, by virtue of reaching a certain age, you move into a category of elder statement or elders in the community, and you have retired. But once you open up places of worship and you allow large congregations to gather, the chances is that they will turn up. Reason being that they find satisfaction in their making supplications to their God. The generation of today can decide to run church on the internet. And there are churches like that all over the world that are internet driven. The older generation do not belong to that class. So it's the congregation that makes them feel involved. And we are saying that mass gatherings, either for the purposes of the Eid or for the purposes of congregating on Sundays, for now, exposes this particular percentage of people to serious danger. That is the message. It exposes this particular category of people to serious danger, and that it is the responsibility of government to ensure that they are not exposed to those dangers. COVID-19 for sure has come to stay with us, but we must take steps and prepare for it into the future. And I've often said, it has completely disrupted our ways of life. We will not return to the past ways of life. It's just impossible. Six months ago, you could just pick your handbag and just head to the airport and buy the ticket there and fly out. Can you do it today? You didn't need to prepare. All you needed to do, if you have your money, you pick your handbag, you turn up at the airport, there's available seat on the plane, you pay and go. You can't. There are several things that we wish to do that we have done in the past. We want to continue to do it. It has become impossible for you. And going into the future, it's wishful thinking to think that you will operate in that climate again. No. And that is very, very important that we begin to take ownership of these things and we begin to have a paradigm shift. And have an understanding that, look, things have changed. We must adapt to this season and do everything humanly possible to protect ourselves and protect our loved ones. The question about environment, the Minister of FCT has said that all the fumigation charges have been harmonized under the Abuja Environmental Agency, and that whoever has lodged that complaint and whoever is watching, if you are a resident of Abuja, if you have any reason to seek clarification, approach the minister's office. They have harmonized the bills. Don't even pay now. Seek clarification from the minister's office first so that you would know exactly what is the harmonized charges for fumigation, if there are going to be any. The last question has to deal with procurement, I think, as to whether the suspension of civil societies from observing procurement processes would not add corruption into the future. Observing procurement processes will not stop corruption, and it has never stopped it. The issue of corruption anywhere in the world is a matter of the heart and the attitude. And we need to deal with that. And the most fundamental thing that we must begin to do as a nation is to build capacity for our institutions that fight corruption, and to place certain measures in place that will make it impossible for it to thrive. If the approach in the past has been to wait until the act has been committed before prosecution, then we must have to retool and rethink the processes to equip the institution and enable them to stop it from happening. And observing the opening of bids never stopped it from happening. So there must be an institutional re-engineering of the entire processes. I have not seen the guidelines that have been issued, because I'm not an accounting officer, so I don't do procurement. But if that has been issued, it is because of the emergency of the times. And the Procurement Act in itself allows for emergency procurement. By law, it allows for it because of the emergencies of the time. And I remember discussing with the COVID people and the NNPC people. One of the reasons why they decided to procure with the resources that they have gathered is that they told me point blank, they have their own governance culture and their own governance processes, which is different from that of the government. In terms of speed, access, and decision making, they could be fast because they have their own governance culture. The government is encumbered most times because of the bureaucratic processes. It has to go through different processes. Businesses in most of the international organizations these days is online. You don't even have to call a meeting. The procurement process can be undertaken and be done online. Contracts are awarded online and everything online and signed off by the various officers. We have to advertise in 2 or 3 national papers and the tender journal. We have to wait for 21 days or 3 or 30 days, and all those processes are processes that is entirely different from what is obtainable in the corporate world. So, what is the summary? Corruption is attitudinal, and it is a thing of the heart and of the mind. And we must begin to work as a country to educate our people about the dangers, what it does to our system, and what it has brought onto us as a country. I think this is about the questions that I have. I would end at this thought. Initially when I spoke about the figures of fatalities in this country, and I mentioned the fact that for some of us, it's not the number. And I believe for some of you, it's not the number. You can place faces to those figures. And that's the reality of COVID-19. And that is what we have come to live with. I don't know your experiences out there, but I can tell you that it is one thing that has totally disrupted. One thing that has totally disrupted our social life. And I will end on this light note. I leave my house every day and I return in the evening. I'm treated as a suspect. I have to wash my hands. I have to decontaminate my shoes. I have to walk into my house. And barely would I be sitting down. My wife will ask me, have you bathed? I say, I've just arrived. I don't know what your experiences are. But that's the level of disruption that COVID-19 has brought into our homes and into our lives. And it is the way we respond to it that will determine whether we will win this war. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you very much, Chairman PTF COVID-19. That brings us to the end of the national briefing for today. There are 2 messages that are coming out of today's national briefing. The first one is an appeal. We appeal to you, do not practice self-medication. It is very dangerous. Hydroxychloroquine has not been certified for use in treating COVID-19 in Nigeria by the relevant health and pharmaceutical authorities. If you are sick, please seek medical advice. If you are confirmed positive, please go to the approved isolation centers. Protect yourself, protect your loved ones, and the community. The second message is this. As we prepare to go for the short holidays, COVID-19 is not going on break. We must remain vigilant and protect ourselves. We must avoid large gatherings. We must comply with the measures put in place. We must eschew skepticism about its existence and potency. We must change our behavior. We must commit to joining hands in battling this pandemic. Finally, we must take responsibility. I thank you very much. God bless Nigeria. We shall be having the final briefing for the week tomorrow, because the next one will be on Wednesday after the break. So we hope to see you here tomorrow at 3 o'clock. God bless Nigeria. Good night.